Well, we hear a lot about how Tai Chi and Qigong and meditation can help boost the immune function. There's research that I've covered in my book, The Gospel of Science, that shows that research that Tai Chi can boost the helper T cell count by anywhere between 50% and 100% more helper T cells. And the helper T cells are critical because they consume virus and bacteria cells and other cells that the body needs to get rid of. But the question is how does that happen? How does the helper T cell count get boosted in meditation and Tai Chi and Qigong? And the answer to that lies with the pineal gland. The pineal gland is in the center of the brain, and the pineal gland is the place where we hold on to control when we're thinking about things, considering things, planning things, solving things. When we're intellectually engaged, the pineal gland in the center of the brain is somewhat constricted. There's a sense of control in there. When we start to practice these mind-body practices, whether it's sitting Qigong, Neigong, energy meditation, or whether it's moving Qigong or Tai Chi, what happens when we practice these things in that state of mind? We're practicing letting go of control, letting go of analytical thought or even word thought, and letting the mind drift in pure consciousness, where it just drifts into places, and then that changes the brain waves. And so the common brain waves that we have are beta brain waves, which is busy brain waves, alpha state, which is a meditative experience, a more relaxed experience that you get from mind-body practices. And then you've got delta and theta, which are sleep and deep sleep states. And so these techniques allow us to let that pineal gland just let go of control, let go of analysis. And when it lets go, everything lets go. Our whole being and our whole body and our whole field start to let go. So the brainwave changes is a reflection of something that is happening in a much larger way than just what's happening in the brain. It's a field experience. It's when we let go of being a separate thing and we allow ourselves to become part of the connection of the whole of the universe. And so how does this happen? How does that affect the helper T cell counts? Well, what research has shown, and again, I get into all this in the Gospel of Science with endnotes so that you can go to the original studies, the original articles or research. And what they've found is that these kind of meditative experiences have an impact on our DNA. You've all seen the helix of the DNA coil. And what happens when the normal stresses that we pick up in our daily lives, they cause tension, and they found that the DNA coils actually coil more tightly due to that stress. But when we practice these mind-body techniques and these mind-body experiences where we let that pineal gland let go and we let ourselves just drift in pure consciousness, then what happens, or one of the things that happens, is the DNA uncoils. It becomes less tightly coiled. And that changes the DNA expression. So it changes the way that every part of our being, every part of our mind and our body function when that DNA relaxes out of that tightly coiled state. And so one of the results that we see is the boost in helper T cell count. But there's many other benefits that we get from meditation, mentally, physically, emotionally, and on levels that we couldn't even really begin to describe.
each other, there is no garden.
The world spends over $8 trillion per year on healthcare. Several years ago, I read a multi-year study conducted by one of the world's largest health institutions, revealing that around 70% of the illness sending people to their doctors was caused by stress. Not aggravated by stress, but caused by stress. After seeing this study, I called Dr. David Sabel, a Kaiser Permanente physician familiar with the research, to make sure I read this amazing fact correctly. He excitedly explained that depending on how you looked at the data, that number could go even higher than 70% of illness being caused by stress. Dr. Herbert Benson of Harvard states that between 60 to 90% of illness can be most effectively treated with mind-body education, meditation, Tai Chi, yoga, Qigong, mindfulness. This realization that 60 to 90% of illness sending people to doctors is caused by stress and best treated by mind-body practices means that between 4.2 trillion to 6.3 trillion could be saved each and every year by expanding use of mind-body practices throughout society at all levels. If mind-body practices were taught worldwide in public schools as a core part of public education, taught in age-appropriate ways from kindergarten through 12th grade, in 12 years we would profoundly reduce global health costs. Even the most conservative estimate of potential savings would mean trillions of dollars of annual savings each year. What could the world do with trillions of extra dollars? Possibilities are profound. Estimates are that world hunger could be ended with just 30 billion per year. 3.4 million, mostly children, die annually from water-related diseases. According to the World Bank estimates, 150 billion each year would provide clean water worldwide. Wrapping our heads around this, that just a tiny fraction of the trillions in saved health costs could end world hunger and millions of water-related deaths, is huge. Global transformation on a gargantuan scale. This historic study on meditators affecting society, conducted from June to July in 1993, found that when a certain small percentage of the city's population included trained meditators, the HRA, homicides, rapes, and assaults crime rates decreased significantly by 23% at the highest point of infusion of meditators. What was interesting was that there was a correlation in line charts showing that as the number of meditators being brought into the city increased, the crime rates correspondingly dropped. Other meditation research entitled Transcendental Meditation Program and Crime Rate Change in a Sample of 48 Cities, cited at National Crime and Justice Reference Service from the Journal of Crime and Justice, stated that in cities where 1% of the population were instructed and trained in meditation programs, crime rates decreased the following year, in contrast to matched control cities, and the trend remained in the subsequent 5 years. A study by 2 Harvard University professors found that violence decreased between 40% and 80% during the 1980s Israel-Lebanon War, when they organized experienced meditators in the U.S., Yugoslavia, and Israel to focus on the conflict area during meditation. At Folsom State Prison in California, where they had had a Tai Chi program for about 2 years, tracking prison statistics over those years found that not only had behavior rates improved for the meditation group, but for the entire prison. Apodaca Prison in Mexico, the site of one of Mexico's most violent prison events, which saw 0 events of extreme violence after implementing a meditation program for 700 inmates and prison guards and administrators, as reported by Mimi Yagob, writing for Insight Crime. What if bullies were disciplined with meditation? Alternative approaches to conflict resolution may hold a key. This is exactly what a handful of schools in the US and the UK have begun to do. CNN reports that in West Baltimore at Robert W. Coleman Elementary School, meditation interventions have become part of the school culture. The initial results have been overwhelmingly positive. Coleman has not issued a suspension in 2 years, the same amount of time they've been experimenting with teaching mindfulness and calming techniques to students. MNN.com reports that in England, beginning the first week of February, Children's Mental Health Week, up to 370 schools will participate in a 3-year trial involving mindfulness exercises, relaxation techniques, breathing exercises, and student sessions with mental health experts. Psychology Today, June 26, 2019. In 2021, the founders of the Global Transformation Project received amazing news when they were informed by the Princeton University-born Global Consciousness Project data analysts that the global mind-body event they organized, World Tai Chi and Qigong Day, as well as other mind-body events, had increased coherence in global consciousness. Excerpt, New Second Edition, The Gospel of Science, page 590. The Princeton University Paralab-born Global Consciousness Project data showed that this event we created together and other compassion healing-based events increase coherence in global consciousness. Global Consciousness Project data analyst Brian Williams identified 110 events in total. Collectively, these 110 events have a Stouffer's Z-score of 3.283. Z-scores can be confusing. Many people understand probabilities in terms of an odds ratio, and in this case, the p equals 0.00051. On previous pages, GCP Harmony Events Composite 1998-2012 means roughly 2,000 to 1 odds against a chance explanation of the result, indicating that the data is very solid that these global harmonizing events created coherence in the consciousness of the entire planet. And further larger analysis of 500 events leaves virtually no doubt at all. In the GCP's larger analysis of 500 global events, the Z-score was over 7, and in the case of this data, also a 7 sigma score as well. To put this in perspective, if you are a lay reader of research statistics like myself, who may have spent more time at a blackjack table than in a laboratory regarding this data, this 7 sigma deviation corresponds to only a 1 in 1 trillion odds of it happening only by pure chance. Again, keep in mind that only a 5 sigma result was able to give CERN the Nobel Prize for finding the Higgs particle. New Second Edition, The Gospel of Science, pages 375 to 376. Mind-body practices, Tai Chi, Yoga, Qigong, meditation, mindfulness, can take the brain into the alpha and alpha-theta brainwaves. These brainwave changes can increase the empathy and compassion parts of the brain, and when done en masse can increase coherence in global consciousness and reduce violence and chaos in society and the world.
worth noting that virtually all the original founders of quantum physics, legends in the field, knew that consciousness affected the particle wave function. Physicists who argue against it are arguing with the giants of their field, as well as the data you see here. New second edition, The Gospel of Science, page 364. In physics' famed double-slit experiments, electrons are shot through slits, and as one would expect, leaving vertical columns on the detecting screen similar to the slits the particles pass through to get to the detective screen behind the barrier, marking where the electrons hit. This happens when the particles are observed going through the slits, but when not observed, the particles behave like waves. Dr. Dean Radin of the Institute of Noetic Sciences, author of Entangled Minds, Extrasensory Experiences in a Quantum Reality, The Noetic Universe, and the Conscious Universe, The Scientific Truth of Psychic Phenomena, conducted a very large multi-year experiment involving at first people sitting within 2 meters of the laser shooting particles through the slits, engaged in alternating periods of focusing and not focusing on a mental image of particles passing through the slits. In 4 pilot studies, the meditators did quite well. A follow-up study found a similar result, producing a 4.5 sigma result. The 4.5 sigma score effect was when people were observing, but when no one was observing, the result was almost exactly chance results. The researchers followed up these findings with 2 years of study to see if the results could be replicated, involving 2,985 sessions with 1,479 people. When all the results were combined in a meta-analysis, the result was between approximately 4 to 8 sigma effects. Again, 5 sigma got CERN the Nobel Prize for the Higgs particle. Upon my contacting Dr. Radin to make certain I understood the data correctly, he gave me links to updated articles, explaining that some of their best, even more conservative studies, later analysis achieved about a z equals 4.5. Not quite a 5.0, however, z equals 4.4 means in statistical odds terms that there was only a 1 in 180,000 chance that their scores could have been only pure random chance. We also look at things that are organized. Intentional worldwide meditations are an especially good example. The bottom line, what's the combined output from all this experimentation involving data from 500 such events worldwide over a period of years? And it's a really powerful indication that there is some effect of something like global consciousness. You can't be entirely sure what causes it, but there are good reasons to believe that it really is a gathering of consciousness from around the world, which changes the way our random number generators behave. The odds against chance are remarkably high, more than 1 trillion to 1. That's 3 trillion to 1. In scientific terminology, we see a deviation that is more than 7 sigma, meaning more than 7 standard deviations away from what's expected, way out there. My favorite finding in the whole process of looking at the data of the Global Consciousness Project is that compassion is the emotion that is most powerful. The Global Transformation Project has launched a global campaign to get a United Nations resolution advocating mind-body education as the core part of public education worldwide. It would not be mandatory for any nation, school, or student, but the science is far too overwhelming on how mind-body education in public education would improve students' behavior, focus, and test scores. Mind-body education, according to science, could increase IQs, creative thinking, reduce bullying and conflict, boost students' immunity, improve GRE reading scores, math proficiency skills, and verbal fluency, and boost students' test scores. But to get a United Nations resolution, how could that happen? There is a precedent for this. In 2015, the United Nations General Assembly voted in a UN resolution creating the International Day of Yoga, which the Global Consciousness Project data revealed has increased coherence in global consciousness. This resolution made history, being co-sponsored by more nations than any previous resolution had. 177 nations co-sponsored this global health education effort of a World Yoga Day. And the reasons for doing so align with the reasons for a resolution advocating mind-body education for public education worldwide. The Global Transformation Project's website has a draft of the United Nations resolution with a petition that mind-body practitioners and anyone can sign to encourage the United Nations missions to bring this mind-body education in public education to a vote. When you sign the petition, you will get updates from GTP on this historic movement for global transformation's progress. In signing this petition for a UN resolution advocating mind-body education worldwide, you will be joining with a distinguished growing number of renowned physicists, health, and education professionals supporting this effort. The petition for a UN resolution advocating mind-body education worldwide supporters include the founders of World Tai Chi and Qigong Day, William and Angela Wong Douglas, the founder of Heart Math, Dr. Roland McCratty, past director of the Princeton University Engineering and Anomalies Research Lab, Dr. Roger Nelson, Peter Wayne, PhD, Bernard Osher, Associate Professor of Medicine in the field of Complementary and Integrative Medical Therapies, Harvard Medical School, Dr. Shin Lin, University of California at Irvine, mind-body researcher, Dr. Roger Yanka, co-founder of the National Qigong Association and mind-body researcher published with the National Institutes of Health, Dr. Christine Rhodes, professor in the College of Business at Kutztown University, doctorate in educational technology, Sharon Rose, master's degree Fulbright senior research scholar to India in the fields of the arts and education, master's degree in education, Effie Poyu Chow, PhD, appointed by President Clinton to the White House Commission on Complementary and Alternative Medicine Policy, Clara Apollo, UK Health Radio Network host of Chi Time, Dr. Paul Lamb, teaches postgraduate family physicians and is a clinical lecturer in the University of New South Wales, Australia, for over 30 years.